My name is Stella Brooks, a 65-year-old widow living in a quiet Phoenix neighborhood, where the sun bakes the pavement by mid-morning and the scent of citrus trees fills the air. For 10 years since my husband Raphael passed, my world has revolved around my two sons and the family we've built together. Stephen, my eldest, is a dedicated architect with a quiet intensity about him, while Ivan, my youngest, achieved his childhood dream of becoming an airline pilot. But the center of my universe had become Stephen's family, his wife, Araceli, and their 7-year-old son, Matthew, my bright-eyed grandson, who filled our home with laughter and crayon drawings. The morning it all began felt like any other. The familiar sounds of our household routine played out around me, the clatter of breakfast dishes, the distant hum of Stephen's car pulling away for work, Matthew's cheerful shouts as he boarded the school bus. I stood at the kitchen sink, my hands submerged in warm, soapy water, watching the bubbles catch the morning light. The scent of coffee and toast still hung in the air, comforting and familiar. "Mom!" Araceli's voice floated down from the top of the stairs. "I'm going to take a quick shower." "Okay, dear," I called back, smiling to myself. That was my daughter-in-law, always meticulous, always fresh, and put together in her crisp white blouses and perfectly pressed slacks. I heard her footsteps retreat toward the bathroom, then the familiar groan of pipes as water began to flow. I had just put away the last plate when the telephone rang. Wiping my hands on my apron, I moved to answer it, my movements slow and measured. At my age, I'd learned there was no need to rush through life. "Mom!" Ivan's cheerful voice filled my ear, warm and familiar as a hug. "I had some time during a layover and wanted to say hi." Hearing from my pilot son always lifted my spirits. We chatted for a few minutes about his flight schedule, the weather in whatever city he was passing through, the ordinary details that make up a mother's concern for her child. But then his tone shifted, becoming hesitant, almost uneasy. "Hey, Mom. Something really weird just happened," he said. "My sister-in-law is at the house?" I glanced toward the staircase where I could still hear the shower running. "Of course she is, honey. Araceli is upstairs taking a shower right now." The silence on the other end stretched so long I could hear the faint hum of airport noise behind him. When he finally spoke again, his voice had dropped to a serious, almost disbelieving whisper. "Mom! That's impossible, because I have her passport right here in my hand. She just boarded my flight to France." A laugh bubbled up in my throat. "Oh, honey, you must have seen wrong. I just spoke with Araceli less than 10 minutes ago." But Ivan didn't laugh with me. Instead, he began explaining in that slow, deliberate way he has when he's processing something extraordinary. He told me how, after all, passengers had boarded, he'd stepped out to retrieve some forgotten paperwork and found a passport lying near the gate. When he opened it, he found himself staring at Araceli's photograph, her name printed clearly beside it. "Mom, I even went down to the passenger cabin to check," he continued, his voice firming with conviction. "She's sitting in the first class, next to a man who looks very wealthy and elegant. They were talking very close, like they were a couple." The words landed like physical blows. A couple? Impossible. I had just heard Araceli's voice, seen her in the flesh in this very house. But right at that moment, the sound of running water ceased upstairs. I heard the bathroom door open, then Araceli's voice called down, soft but clear. "Mom, who is it?" Panic fluttered in my chest. "Just a friend of mine," I replied quickly, my voice trembling as I hurried into the living room to avoid her gaze. I heard her peek out from the stairs, her hair still damp from the shower. Closing the living room door behind me, I whispered into the phone, "Ivan, I just heard Araceli. She's here. She just finished showering. Are you absolutely sure you didn't make a mistake?" On the other end, my son fell silent again. Then his voice came through, harsher than I'd ever heard it. "Mom, it's impossible. I have her right in front of me on this plane. I'm looking at her right now." The receiver felt suddenly heavy in my hand. I hung up, my fingers shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. The sunny living room seemed to contract around me, the air growing thick and difficult to breathe. I collapsed onto the couch, my mind reeling. If Araceli was here, who was the woman on Ivan's flight? And if the woman on the flight was Araceli, who was the person in my house? A few minutes later, Araceli came down to the kitchen. She wore a fresh light blue dress, her damp hair combed neatly, her smile as sweet and familiar as always. "Mum, I'm going to the market early today. Do you want me to get you any vegetables or anything?" Her voice was kind, ordinary, exactly as it had been every morning for the past 6 years since she'd married Stephen. I looked at her, trying to force a smile, but inside, I felt as if I carried stones in my chest. "Yes, honey. Bring some tomatoes, please," I managed, my throat dry. Araceli nodded, took her wicker basket, and walked out. I stood watching her disappear behind the gate, my soul in turmoil. I didn't believe Ivan was lying. My son had always been honest to a fault, deeply sensitive and affectionate with his family. But Araceli, the daughter-in-law I had lived with for years, had just been standing before me, unmistakable and real. As the midday sun filtered through the curtains, casting faint stripes of light on the tiled floor, I sat in silence and let my mind wander back through recent months. Small, strange details began resurfacing, things I had dismissed as unimportant at the time. There were days when Araceli would leave the house cheerful and return quiet and withdrawn. Times when her mood shifted so dramatically, it was as if a different person had walked through the door. I remembered one afternoon a few months back when I'd seen Araceli writing a grocery list with her right hand, her penmanship straight and neat as always. But the next day, I'd watched her use her left hand, the letters looping and uncertain. When I'd asked about it, she'd laughed and said she was just practicing. I'd accepted the explanation without question. Now that detail sharpened in my mind, becoming a piece of something larger I couldn't yet see. The front door opened, pulling me from my thoughts. Matthew burst in, his backpack bouncing, his face alight with 7-year-old excitement. "Grandma! The teacher complimented me today because I drew so well." I pulled him into a hug, breathing in the scent of crayons and little boy. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Show me what you drew." He pulled out his notebook, flipping to a colorful page filled with stick figures and a bright yellow sun. "Look, Grandma, yesterday my mom helped me with my homework with her right hand, and her writing was so pretty." He turned the page. "But today she wrote with her left, and it came out uglier." My heart stuttered. There it was again, the shifting handedness. "Your mom must have been busy today," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "She was probably tired." But Matthew looked up with those clear, innocent eyes that see everything. "Grandma, my mom is so weird. Some days she hugs me really, really tight, but other days she doesn't even look at me." His words pierced me. I held him closer, my mind racing. Just then, the doorbell rang. Mrs. Collins, my neighbor from across the street, stood there with a plate. The one Araceli had taken her some cookies on yesterday. "Stella," she said, her kind eyes curious. "Your daughter-in-law is so nice, but yesterday I noticed she gave me the plate with her left hand. You told me she's right-handed, right? That's strange." I forced a smile. "Maybe she uses both hands, Helen. Would you like to come in for some tea?" She declined, but her comments settled like a thorn in my mind. It wasn't just me. Others were noticing the inconsistencies too. That afternoon I found myself watching Araceli more closely than ever before. When she returned from the market, I noted she carried her basket with her left hand, though I remembered clearly she'd always been right-handed. When I asked what she'd bought, her reply was polite but slightly rushed. Tomatoes, cilantro, and fresh fish. I'm going to make the roasted fish you like so much tonight. Her voice was soft as always, but I couldn't shake the feeling something was off. At dinner, the atmosphere felt strained. When Matthew accidentally spilled his water, Araceli frowned sharply. Matthew, why are you so clumsy? Be more careful. Stephen looked up, surprised. Araceli, it was an accident. You always defend him, she snapped, her eyes flashing with uncharacteristic anger. I end up looking like the bad guy in this house. The table fell silent. Matthew lowered his head, his eyes filling with tears. I hugged him, my heart aching. This irritable and sharp-tongued woman was nothing like the sweet daughter-in-law who had tenderly reminded Stephen about a parent-teacher conference just days before. That night, after cleaning the kitchen, I took an old notebook from a drawer. My hand trembled as I wrote the first line. 3:00 p.m. Araceli leaves for market, returns. 6:00 p.m. wearing blue blouse. Irritable attitude. I didn't know what I was doing, only that I could no longer pretend nothing was happening. The notes continued over the following days. Each entry, a heavy stroke, adding to a picture I was afraid to see clearly. 3 days after Ivan's call, I found myself confiding in my oldest friend Carol at our usual corner coffee shop. Over cups of steaming coffee, I poured out the whole story. Ivan's call, the passport, the shifting handwriting, the mood changes. I showed her my notebook, my shaky handwriting documenting the inconsistencies. Carol studied the pages, her expression growing increasingly concerned. Stella, you've noticed everything, she said quietly. Every time she leaves and comes back, it's like she's another person. What do you think it is? I don't know, I admitted, gripping my coffee cup. I'm just scared. Scared that Araceli is hiding something. Scared my family will break apart if I dig deeper. But I can't stop. Just then, Mrs. Jenkins from the vegetable market stopped by our table. Mrs. Brooks, what a coincidence. Last week I saw your daughter-in-law at the market. So kind. She even bought extra cilantro. But this morning, she came by looking so serious. Didn't even say hello. Is something wrong? I forced another smile. She must be tired, Marie. But inside, I felt like I was drowning. Another person had noticed. Carol took my hand. See, Stella, it's not just you. Trust your gut. If you don't find out the truth, you'll always live with doubt, and you won't be able to protect Matthew or Stephen. The following weekend, with Stephen working overtime and Matthew at a school activity, I found myself alone with Araceli. When she announced she was going to the market, wearing a pale yellow floral dress, something in me snapped. I had to know. I waited until she left, then threw on my old shawl and followed at a distance, my heart pounding. The sun beat down, sweat soaking my back. But I didn't care. I needed answers. Araceli walked briskly toward the market, but then, instead of turning right as she always did, she turned left into an alley behind a working-class neighborhood. The houses here were old and cramped, with peeling paint and rusty tin roofs. I slowed, hiding behind parked bicycles, my breath coming in ragged pants. She didn't look back. She entered a narrow alley where sunlight barely reached, stopping before an old wooden door. After a soft knock, she disappeared inside. I stood frozen, my mind reeling. What was my daughter-in-law doing here? This wasn't the market or any friend's house she'd ever mentioned. I wanted to knock, to demand answers, but fear rooted me to the spot. Finally, I turned and hurried home, my questions multiplying with every step. But when I pushed through the gate, I froze. Araceli stood in the kitchen, chopping vegetables, wearing a white blouse completely different from the floral dress I'd just seen her in. She frowned at me, her eyes cold and sharp. "Where did you go, Mom? That you're just getting back?" I stood speechless, my mouth dry. Only minutes ago, I'd seen her enter that alley in a yellow dress. How could she have returned so quickly? And changed clothes? I just went for a walk," I stammered. She nodded without another word, but her gaze sent shivers down my spine. That night, as I sat knitting, Matthew ran into my room in tears. "Grandma, my mom yelled at me just because I dropped a pencil. Not like yesterday. Yesterday she was so nice, she even hugged me." I held him close, my heart breaking. "Your mom was tired, honey. Don't be sad." But Matthew hid his face in my shoulder and whispered the words that would haunt me. "Grandma, I want the mom from yesterday." The next morning, I returned to that alley, determined to find answers. I brought a family photo, the one where Araceli smiles radiantly beside Stephen and Matthew. At a corn stand, I showed the picture to the vendor. "Excuse me, have you seen this young woman around here?" She studied it closely, then pointed. "Oh yes, of course. She comes and goes often from the house at number 14, that one over there." My heart hammered in my throat as I approached number 14, a house with stained walls, a peeling wooden door, and a wilted daisy in a pot on the windowsill. I knocked, each rap sounding like a hammer blow to my chest. The door opened, and I found myself staring at a woman identical to Araceli. Same face, same body, same long, black hair. The only difference was her frightened expression and the way her hands shook as she clutched a rag. "Araceli," I stammered. The woman started, moving to slam the door, but another voice called from inside. "Isadora, don't hide anymore. You know this is wrong too." A young woman emerged from the shadows, thin, with her hair in a bun, her gaze intelligent and kind. "My name is Lucy Miller, Isadora's roommate, Mrs. Brooks. Please come in. It's time you knew the truth." I stepped into the small tin-roofed house. The walls were stained, the concrete floor cracked, the air thick with the scent of disinfectant. In one corner, an old man coughed weakly on a cot covered with a frayed blanket. The woman who looked like Araceli lowered her head, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm sorry. I'm not Araceli. My name is Isadora." I sank into a wooden chair, my mind reeling. "Explain to me why you look exactly like my daughter-in-law, and why you show up at my house." Isadora remained silent, but Lucy began to speak calmly. "Isadora is very poor, Mrs. Brooks. Her adopted parents are ill, especially the gentleman lying there. A few years ago she met Araceli by chance. They looked identical, and Araceli proposed that Isadora pretend to be her sometimes, replacing her for a few hours when needed. Isadora didn't want to, but Araceli paid well, and her family needed medicine money." I looked at Isadora, saw her knuckles white as she gripped the rag. "Replace her for what?" I pressed. "Why would Araceli need someone to pretend to be her?" Isadora looked up, her voice trembling. "I don't know everything, ma'am. She would just tell me to stay in the house for a few hours, go to the market, take care of the boy, then she'd pay me. I didn't dare ask for more." Every strange detail from the past months suddenly clicked into place. The shifting handwriting, the changing personalities, the inconsistent behavior. It all made sense now. Lucy continued, her gaze sharpening. "I don't know if this helps, but once I saw Araceli with a very elegant man named Charles Thompson. They were calling each other honey, very affectionately. Isadora was waiting outside in the car, not understanding anything. Charles Thompson. The name struck me like a physical blow. Ivan's words echoed in my mind. She's sitting in first class next to a rich man. The small room seemed to spin around me. I tried to stay calm, but my hands shook so badly I knocked over a glass of water. Lucy rushed to clean it up, but I just shook my head, my voice choking. Araceli is deceiving my family. Isadora broke down, sobbing. I'm so sorry, Mom. I didn't want to hurt anyone. I just wanted to save my parents. Looking at this young woman with Araceli's face, but eyes full of pain and regret, I felt my anger soften into pity. She wasn't the mastermind, just a pawn in Araceli's game. I learned more over subsequent visits. Isadora's adoptive mother, Mrs. Jones, revealed the stunning truth. Isadora and Araceli were twins, separated at birth when their impoverished biological parents could only keep one child. Mrs. Jones, then a nurse, had adopted the abandoned infant, Isadora. The pieces fell into place with devastating clarity. Araceli had not only been deceiving us with a lover, but she'd been using her own twin sister as a double to conceal her affair. The confrontation came during a family dinner I orchestrated, a last supper for our old life. When Ivan arrived with Isadora, the room fell into stunned silence. Matthew looked between the two identical faces, confused. Why are there two moms? Araceli shot to her feet. What is this about, Mom? I stood, gripping the table edge. Sit down, Araceli. We need to clear everything up. I told them everything. Ivan's call, the passport, the shifting behaviors, my discovery of Isadora, the truth about the twins. You and Isadora are sisters, I said, looking straight at Araceli. You took advantage of your own sister to hide the truth. Tell us what the truth is. Araceli trembled, her face pale. She's making it all up to humiliate me. How dare you? But Ivan placed a stack of papers on the table. This is a copy of your electronic passport with entry and exit stamps from France. You can't be at home and flying to France simultaneously. Araceli stared at the evidence, her lips tight. Then Matthew spoke up, his innocent voice laced with pain. It's true, Grandma. Some days my mom is an angel, and other days she's really mean. I don't like the mean mom. The air grew heavy enough to suffocate. Lucy, who had entered quietly, added her testimony about seeing Araceli with Charles Thompson, about the affair, about the deception. Stephen turned to his wife, his voice breaking. Is it true, Araceli? Tell me, is it true? Araceli stood in silence for a long moment, then suddenly yelled, her voice full of fury. Yes, it's true. I have a lover. I'm sick of this poor life. I'm sick of being the daughter-in-law in this house. Charles gives me a life 100 times better. And you, Stephen, you're good for nothing. Her words exploded in the room like a bomb. Stephen stood frozen, his fists clenched white. Matthew burst into tears and ran to me. Araceli turned and left, the door slamming shut behind her, leaving our family in ruins. In the painful aftermath, Stephen and Araceli divorced. She didn't seek custody of Matthew, as if he'd been merely part of a play she'd tired of. Stephen retreated into himself, broken by the betrayal. But slowly, something beautiful emerged from the wreckage. Isadora began visiting regularly, bringing food, playing with Matthew, wiping away his tears when he asked about his mother. Her genuine kindness and steady presence became a balm to our wounded family. One afternoon, I watched Matthew run to Isadora with his cheerful little voice. Mom, Isadora, teach me how to draw a little bird. My heart tightened even as it swelled with hope. The boy was calling her Mom, with a smile I hadn't seen in months. Months later, Stephen proposed to Isadora in our living room, his voice trembling with nervous hope. When she accepted through happy tears, looking to me for approval, I gave it wholeheartedly. She had healed our family simply by being her true, kind self. Their wedding was small, but filled with genuine love. As I sat watching them exchange vows, surrounded by family and the scent of garden roses, I realized that the painful truth had ultimately set us free. We had lost a fraud, but gained a sincere heart. The deception had nearly destroyed us, but in its aftermath we found a love built on honesty, and that made all the difference.